Good evening, everybody. This is Scott Reed once again with Duck Sports Authority, your host for the Flock Talk podcast. I'm joined as always by Drew Davis. We are going to really just talk a lot about the Wisconsin game tonight because we don't have anything to preview. We'll preview that next week, the Washington game, but we'll dig into the Wisconsin game. There's a lot of good stuff that I saw, mostly defensively, and a lot of things that I saw that I think could be improved. What do you think, Drew, was the biggest, most surprising thing for you in what you saw against Wisconsin?
I guess one of the most surprising things, they came out and they did a really good job defensively, Wisconsin. It's tough when you have a team that's coming off a bye week. They have some extra time to prep, to look at some film and tendencies. And so they just did a really good job of forcing some things. Oregon was able to drive down the field, get into the red zone, had to settle for field goals a couple times. If you would have told me that Oregon was going to score one touchdown and it wasn't going to be till after halftime, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. But that just speaks to the work Wisconsin put in. Like I said, I've said this before. When you're the number one team in the nation, you get everybody's best shot. And when we talked about this early in the year, I said, hey, I see that game at Camp Randall kind of probably being one that we struggle to get through, but it wasn't because the team that Wisconsin had. It was more so I was thinking weather related, some snow, some low temperatures. But this shows that the Ducks aren't invincible. But just what I did like is that they pulled through in the second half, and when they had to put a drive together after Wisconsin went up seven, they did that, made a big fourth down and nine, and kind of just showed like, yeah, we still got this. We let you guys hang with us for a little bit, but we'll go ahead and ride home with this W.
Yeah, and the thing that I noticed about the offense, there's just little things. Everybody, it's not just that Tez Johnson's not there. They're missing him a lot more than I think people expected Oregon to miss him. I thought, people thought, oh, well, Justice will just step in, or Evan Stewart will just step in, and they've got so much talent, they're just going to step in. But the problem isn't that the other players aren't talented. It's that the connection, the emotional connection, the trust that Dylan Gabriel has in Tez Johnson is different. And it's his. We'll call it a security blanket. It's a person with a security blanket. That's his security blanket, and you could see the difference on the pass that was intercepted in the red zone. The throw to
Mhm.
Justice Lowe. If that throws out in front of Lowe, that's a touchdown. And I don't know that we would have had the same issue if that's Tez Johnson. We might have, we might not have. But I think that trust is not there yet with some of these other guys. That connection's not there yet, and I think that's what's missing when Tez is not there. Not just his speed, because there's other guys with that speed. It's that trust, that connection that sometimes two people have. Bo Nix had it with two receivers, and that helped because he had Franklin and Tez Johnson. And right now, Gabriel's got Tez, but his only other real trust security blanket is Terrence Ferguson, and he's not going to beat anybody with his speed. So you can't get those deeper shots out of this offense without somebody like a Tez that he trusts.
Yeah, and
Um,
I agree with that. There was a certain point in the game I looked in the second quarter, and Evan Stewart had I think 7 or 8 receptions, and although Dylan Gabriel had went to 8 other receivers, 7 or 8 other receivers, nobody else had more than one catch outside of Evan Stewart, and I thought that was real surprising.
it was, he went to Evan Stewart early. He used him as his deep threat. He's a deep shot guy. Took two deep shots with Evan. One of them hit. The other one, the wind caught that ball. Anybody could say what they want. That wind caught that ball. It was pretty clear. It was fluttering up there, but he didn't really have that ability to find other people. Now, credit to Wisconsin. Their defense was getting pressure, not
Mhm.
necessarily making sacks. They had two sacks in the game. It's not like but they were getting pressure. They were forcing Gabriel off his spot a lot, and he had to scramble a lot and make plays with his feet. He did, and he did a good job with that. It's just that changes everything. It changes your eyes. It changes everything you're trying to do as an offense and your timing. It throws everything off when they're getting pressure. And that is where, when you're in your eighth consecutive week without a bye, all conference opponents, three of those weeks in the last five across multiple time zones, when you're talking Purdue, Michigan, and now Wisconsin trips, that's a lot of time to be out there getting beat up every week. Your offensive line was down at this point, a couple of starters with Marcus Harper having gone down. I think you could see that that team needed a break. This bye week could not have come at a better time. I don't know, back before, I think when you played, there weren't two bye weeks. There was usually just the one bye week, but it was usually well timed somewhere in the middle of the season that really helped. Kind of talk. I think you have a great experience with that of what that bye week does for how it allows you to kind of get everything back in your body and kind of re-energize your body, your spirit, because you get that rest. You get that week without getting beat up one more time.
Yeah, it's very different. And back when I played, back in my day, it was more so that, we didn't have two bye weeks, but we had one bye week, and then we also had maybe like a longer week when we paid on a Thursday or Friday. So you might get 1 or 2 days of break in there. But one big thing, it depends on when your bye weeks are. I talk about it in college and the NFL. You want to have that bye week that kind of breaks up the monotony, either like halfway through the season or a little bit more than half. So you can be like, okay, this is a halfway point. But it's also like you said, 8 weeks. We're down a couple guys. It's not as bad as it could be. And during the game, I was even thinking like, yo, we haven't had Jordan Birch the majority of this year, like for these big matchups and big games, and the defense has still held their own. So that's a good thing. But anytime you're able to have a bye week and you're able to come out of that a little bit more rested, and you can really see like the light at the end of the tunnel where you're like, okay, now we have Washington, we have a Big Ten title game that we have to go through, and then we have this playoff push, and in between that you have a couple more weeks. So I think you're in pretty good shape when you can look up and you're undefeated, and you have some guys that will be coming back, and Tez Johnson, Marcus Harper, who might be close or 1 or 2 more games away, and even Jordan Birch, who hopefully he's getting healthy soon as well. But you're like, yo, this is what we're doing, and we don't even have all of our guys. This is really good.
It is, and I think that gives some hope because as I watched the Ohio State, we talked about how they played against Penn State, the absence of their starting left tackle, their second string left tackle, so they put their starting guard out at tackle, and now they've lost their starting center for the season with an Achilles tear, which is really brutal. It's such a tough thing, and nobody ever wants to see a player get injured, and to see that happen to a team that's already seen a lot of injuries at the line, it kind of skews what I expect to see Saturday. I still think Ohio State's better than Indiana, and I still think they're going to win that game, but it's going to expose some things because I do think the Indiana defense is probably better than people give them credit for, and I think they're going to be able to get some pressure. I and Oregon is lucky because those injuries that they've had, one, nothing really season ending other than it appears maybe Matthew Bedford may not return. We won't know because Dan Lanning does not talk injuries, but the other one, Jaleel Florence. I don't think Jaleel Florence is going to play this year. I think whatever happened with his leg last year, it was serious enough that I don't know that he's going to play this year. And at this point, I don't know that they need Jaleel Florence to try to come back in that defensive backfield. He's going to be rusty. He's going to have a lot of things to try to get back. But Oregon has been lucky. Their injuries have not been as devastating as some of these other injuries, and that's some of it that goes to the strength and conditioning staff and the sports and science staff and the other staff that help keep these guys healthy. But all elite schools have that. Ohio State has that kind of stuff. It's not like they're sitting there running the old-fashioned, we don't know what we're doing, weight room training sessions. They're doing it just as scientifically. Just bad luck sometimes, and they've had that bad luck. And I think Oregon is really lucky heading into this bye because even I know Tez said he's back, and then Lanning said, "Well, you'll know if you know, and you'll see him. If you see him, you'll see him." But even if he's not back for Washington, I think he's back for the Big Ten championship game, and that's going to be huge. Jordan Birch almost certainly is going to be back for the Big Ten championship game, if not for Washington. Probably could have played last Saturday. Another week off is going to help that ankle. I did see the play ish. It was somewhere I guess I think it was early fourth quarter where I saw that where he got kind of tweaked, and it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It didn't get rolled up on. It was just kind of a tweak. Who else? I think you're going to see Marcus Harper probably back for Big Ten championship game. So you're going to see everything coming back together at the right time for Oregon. And fortune, it's really lucky when things fall this way. And I think the thing that somebody else pointed out is if Ohio State gets the seed everybody expects them to get, they're going to be on the Oregon side of the bracket. And if they're on the Oregon side of the bracket, they're going to see each other in the national semifinals. And when that happens, Ohio State will be going on their seventh consecutive game without a bye.
Mhm.
So that's going to be interesting as well if that happens. And I'm going to be interested to see that. I think the other thing, got to talk about Mateo Uyunglele, because it wasn't just the play that ended the game. that sealed the game. And if you watch it in, and I did watch it in frame by frame to see if he happened to get lucky and the ball kind of came over his head, he was actually facing the ball when it got tipped, and you couldn't tell that in fast motion. But when you look at it in frame by frame, he's facing the ball. He's facing Jamari Caldwell. He sees that ball get tipped. He knows where it's going. It's not just that he turns; he knows where to
Mhm.
turn, and he knows which direction to head and intercepts that ball. People forget when he was in high school, he also played tight end, and he was an elite tight end. If he decided to focus on tight end, he would have been a 5-star tight end, and he would have had his same number of schools opting for him. He would have had to probably not be 270. I don't know too many tight ends that play at 270 these days, but he was an elite tight end, and he still has those skills. You can tell that he's never lost those skills. And I've known Mateo. I've met him when I think I met him when he was in 6th grade, and he was a big kid then, and athletic then when he was watching his brother play. And it's the Polynesian Bowl back then. It's been an interesting development for him, but it wasn't just that play. He played tremendous all game long. There was one, the sack he had against Burke
Mhm.
was impressive. If you watched, he used what we'll refer to as a basketball move, the Euro step. He used a Euro step to get around that tackle. That was one of those things that you just don't see true sophomores that weigh 270 pounds and 6'5" that understand how to use their body in a way that it really isn't what defensive ends normally do. And that I was really impressed with Mateo on Saturday.
Yeah, he's very dangerous. Like I said, they're deep, and anytime you can go down the line and you name 4 or 5 guys in the 1 and 2 deep that can make some plays, it's a good thing. And like you said, he's doing things that doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. He has that sack, he has that interception. He forced a holding penalty earlier in the game, I think on a big conversion that they had that brought the ball back. And so, just being disruptive in the backfield for the tackles and the quarterback, where he knows he doesn't have that much time. So I'm really impressed with everything he's doing. He really stood out in that game, and the defense stood out. They had Wisconsin go 1 for 12 on third down. So your offense can stay in the game when your defense is pitching somebody that's going 8.3% on third down, which isn't very good.
No, it's really bad. And Oregon's been pretty good at third down defense this year anyway. I think I had picked before the game as my defensive player of the game. The unsung hero was Jamari Caldwell, and I think in some ways he was a defensive player of the game because he sucks up two guys every time. You have to block him. You have to account for him with your interior line. And when you do, that's what frees up guys like Tatum and guys like Mateo and Jordan Burch to make plays, and Derek Harmon to make plays while Jamari Caldwell is taking up space and eating up blockers. And of course, the tip pass. That is something that he had penetration. He got his hand up at the right time. But it wasn't just that. I think if you looked at that game and you graded him out, every play he was eating up space in a way that allowed other players to get to the ball and put pressure on. When a power four team has less than 100 yards passing, that's a pretty good defensive stand. Oregon's done that a couple times this year, but it was really impressive to do it at home or at Wisconsin, at home for Wisconsin. So on the road against, look, he's not a great quarterback. We're not going to sit here and say he's the next coming of Trevor Lawrence. He's not a great quarterback, but it's still tough to hold a starting quarterback at the power four level to 96 yards while also controlling the run game. It's not like they were. It's I've seen it where you control the pass game, but somebody runs for 204 yards, a la Purdue, right? Purdue ran for over 200 yards. Wisconsin didn't do that. So this was a truly dominant defensive performance from front end to back end at every level. And it was maybe one of the best defensive performances I've seen since Fiesta Bowl, Colorado, 2001. I think that was the last time I saw that kind of a overall dominant defensive performance in that kind of a stage.
Right, taking us back to the Fiesta Bowl. I agree with you. And then on top of that, getting what having a turnover on downs, deep in their territory towards the end. They're doing it all. And if you're for people that really watch football and like really understand it, you know that right now this defense, I wouldn't say carrying the Oregon team or Oregon offense, but they're definitely out front where they're saying, "Yo, we're here too, and you got to deal with us."
I would say they carried the game this week because I think it was known. that it was going to be tough, and they were going to have to make some plays. If you watched the Ducks versus them, I think the staff knew somewhere early in the week that they were going to have to come up with some big defensive plays, that they weren't just going to be able to pull away and win it by 21. They were going to need some key defensive stops, and I think they got that. The one thing that I questioned it during the game, I questioned it after the game. I did not agree with the offensive game plan early. I think
Mhm.
out of the first 21 plays, 15 were passes. I did not agree with that. Wisconsin came into that game giving up 4.9 yards per carry, 179 yards per game. Sack adjusted numbers, I took the sacks out. But when you give up that many yards per carry and that many yards in designed running plays, and you have Jordan James, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought they should have set the tone with the running game early and used that to create the passing game instead of vice versa. They did use that to save Jordan James late, and that last half he rose to the challenge and he was the difference for the offense in the second half. I just didn't like the game plan early. I thought there was a way to separate earlier than they did.
Yeah, you're right. I thought they came in with the game plan, and I look at that all the time. Dylan Gabriel usually he's no more than I want to say 30, like 32, 33 pass attempts a game. And at halftime he had about 20. And so I was like, hold on, so he's on pace for 40. That doesn't really sound right. But then they kind of buckled down in the second half and got back to what they do best. But even when they ran the ball in the first half, they ran it very steadily. Like they were getting chunks of yardage. They were getting 8 yards, they were getting 12 yards. They were just throwing a lot more than they were running. And I was just like, all right, well, I guess they see something in the defense that they really liked and want to take advantage of. But when it came down to it, I think what Jordan James had 5 or 7 carries in the first half. I think Noah Whittington ended up with 1 carry. But one thing that I did like that they did is that they're running Dylan Gabriel a little bit more. They're doing a little bit more quarterback zone read that he can keep it, and he's keeping it. Not to say he's gashing them for 20 or 30 yards, but he's making them have to be honest on the defensive end as far as the end not crashing down or going to get the running back. They have to respect that, sit there, which will open up more lanes for Jordan James and Noah Whittington.
I agree, and I think that's I want to say it's a growth from Will Stein from last year because I don't think Bo Nix ran as much as he could have, and that sometimes limited Oregon in certain situations where they knew they could just load up on certain things because Bo wasn't going to run it. I think Dylan has been running it from earlier in the year than Bo did last year, and he's had enough success that it forces teams to be honest. It forces teams to keep that quarterback defended in a way that if you're going against a statue that can't run the ball, a Dan Marino type quarterback, you can get away with a couple of things that you can't do if that quarterback's going to run the ball. And Gabriel's good enough to make you pay for it. He did it in this game, a couple of them where the threat of the run was enough to open up some other things as well. And I think obviously that's going to be critical going forward. I think the other thing that helps is that Oregon has a backup that feel a lot more confident could come in if needed with the situation. I don't think they were ready to have Ty Thompson be the starter last year if Bo got hurt again. And I think
Mhm.
this year, I think they at least feel some comfort with Dante Moore. Is Dante Moore Dylan Gabriel? No, but he is somebody I think they have some confidence since he started some games. He's had some good games at UCLA when he was a starter there. And I think that helps with allowing Dylan Gabriel to get some carries, especially when they need it. I think there was that draw play for 8 yards. It was perfect. That got them down inside the red zone right before Jordan James scored,
Yep, 100%.
if, if I recall. The other thing, I would love to have seen a little bit more of Kenyon Sadiq. I only saw the one pass. I think Wisconsin did a good job. They have always have good linebackers, and I think that's the thing is the linebackers did a pretty good job, with the exception of the screen pass to Terrence Ferguson that went for a big gain. I think they did a pretty good job in this game defending. And then we'll go and give some heads kudos to Atticus Sappington for they weren't the longest field goals. It's not like he was kicking 55 yarders, but they were high pressure. Everything was high pressure. When you're trailing most of the game and you're having to come in and kick field goals, that's pressure. And he
Mhm.
responded. The 27-yarder didn't look perfect. It kind of looked like maybe it was gonna, but it ended up where it needed to be. And I thought he did a good job with the pressure and not allowing the environment to control him, he controlled his environment, as Dan Lanning would said, the Warriors control the environment, right?
Yeah. And I say anytime the referee puts his hands up like this, don't matter if it's by this much or by a lot, it's good. And then can we also do some research on if this is the first game where there's been two Atticuses on both teams?
You know what? I'm not going to do the research, but I'm going to say it is. I'm just going to make that. It has to be. I can't imagine there's been another time. It's almost certainly the first time a Power Four conference has had two Atticuses facing each other. We now know that they're fans of To Kill a Mockingbird. Somebody is. They did their grade school reading, so and they liked it. Yeah, I think the other thing that was important was I, I thought the punting game wasn't perfect, and it was a game where they needed it, and a couple of good punts, but a couple that weren't what they should have been. So if I were to pick a part where it was weak, the punting game I think needs to improve. If when you get deeper into the playoffs, you're going to need to punt sometimes, and you're going to want to pin some guys deep and not always have it bounce into the end zone and come out. And that's not always on the punter. That's on the coverage guys. The coverage guys didn't get down there and get in the right position for knocking that punt down, and it rolled right by them a couple of times. And that wasn't great because then instead of pinning them at the 5, you give them up to the 20. And it didn't hurt in this case, but it could have. And I think that's an area I'd like to see improve. But I could be being too nitpicky too for a team that is 11-0.
Uh, well, what? So while we're on special teams, can we talk about the fake field goal?
Absolutely. What would you like to
Um,
say?
I think at a certain point in time, I know he's aggressive, and if you're going to be aggressive like that, my thing is leave the offense on the field. Leave 8 on the field, leave the ball in Dylan Gabriel's hands. He's been making some very good decisions. You guys have been very good at fourth and medium, fourth and short with doing some RPO run action with a chance to hit Ferguson in the flat or just an RPO to be able to have another throw. But I thought it was him just trying to be too cute. I think they found something on film which we've talked about the last couple weeks, just as far as he's making people say, what do we overlook? Make sure we're ready. And I know they're to the point where other teams are like, they're gonna do a fake. They're gonna either they're gonna go for 2 on a swinging gate, or they're gonna fake a punt, or they're gonna kick an onside. Like I know that's what coaches are saying, so they're not really surprised. The play was there in a sense, but my thing is, would you rather give the ball to your punter and have him run it, or would you rather have Dylan Gabriel run something like that? And I'm always going to side for having your offense on there to run your best play.
I would think the offense would have probably had more options than what the field goal team had because you've got and I don't want to use the terminology spindly, but you've got a fairly light kicker and a fairly light holder that what are you going to do with the ball? They're not big guys. They're not going to power over anybody. And I know they probably ran this, hundreds of times in practice and they were able to high step it. It's different. The guys in the real game, they get shoestring tackles that you don't get in practice sometimes because there's a little bit more oomph to their effort because this matters now. It's not you can say all you want about in practice we make it matter. At the end of the day of a practice, nobody gets an L in their record because they didn't make a play in practice. They do in a game. And I think that was Wooler that made that play. It was a great play that he made because it really was a step away from being potentially a touchdown. It was that close to being that open. And I don't know if this was truly a fake field goal or if if the look is there fake, if it's not their kick. I don't know that. And I don't know that Dan said one way or the other. If it's their take it, I get the play. Right? Because that's exactly what happened with the Jordan Birch fake punt. It was look at the alignment. If the play is there, it's a fake. If it's not there, you punt the ball. And I think if that was the case, I would understand it. But I agree. Dylan Gabriel is going to make a play there probably that Ross James couldn't make. And I think that's something to consider. And I never thought about it because I made the big argument this week about the fake kneel play, which was not a fake kneel. I hated the terminology because Dylan Gabriel didn't act like he was taking a knee, so it wasn't a fake kneel play. It was a kneel formation where they ran a delayed draw. That there's nothing wrong with that. That's another one of those instances you were talking about where you're forcing a team to be honest in the way they defend you. And that one was Wohler that made that tackle. I know that because I looked back at it. And again, if he doesn't make that tackle, Jordan James scores a touchdown at the end of the first half.
Hmm.
That play was a good play that forces teams to be honest in the way they defend you and don't cheat, don't take a break, don't because Oregon is going to keep coming at you. And I that's an example of an aggressive play. It didn't work, but I liked it. It wasn't a fake kneel. It wasn't like a fake spike or faking like you're going to slide and then doing something that wasn't deceptive in that way. It was a deceptive formation, and that's no different than the swinging gate. That's no different than a old fashioned fumble rooski. Those are fake formations, and there's nothing wrong with them. Just because you think they're going to take a knee, that's your problem. Defend the play. I would have. I like going for it on fourth down in that case because it was a no lose situation. Would I think I agree with you that I would have preferred the offense to do the play, but it was a no lose situation because you knew the defense was going to get the stop, and you knew that Wisconsin wasn't going to go 50 yards in a minute and
Hmm.
get that game time field goal, and they certainly weren't going to go 80 yards and get a touchdown in that minute.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the offense for that. So it was kind of a no lose situation. And I think a lot of different national pundits agreed with you as well, where they said, I don't mind the fourth down. I don't like the field goal. And I think that's probably the consensus for most people.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with that. And it seemed like the play caller was conservative before then too. I know they're trying to get Wisconsin to use their timeouts. Um, but that was just something I was looking into. So it's good to talk about it, good to bounce it off of you.
I would have liked to seen some RPOs in that section instead of the straight handoffs because everybody and their mother knew a straight handoff was coming. I would have liked to have seen a play action rollout where it wasn't a pass because I don't
Mhm.
want to pass down there. I would like to see it be a run, but a play action, you fake the handoff to the running back, you roll out as if you're going to pass, and then you just go ahead and run it. And one, you take an extra 2 seconds off the clock just by rolling out, and two, you have a much better chance at creating a mismatch on the edge than you do when Wisconsin's stacking the box for what they know is coming right at them.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's where I'm at. I don't know if there's a ton more to go over on the game. We talked a lot about the offense, a lot about the defense, and I think we wrapped up. I think the game pretty well. I think next week we'll really dig into Washington. I'm gonna try to see if we can get some extra people on here just to chat about it. I think it'll be fun if we can get some extra people to talk about the game. It's obviously it's a rivalry game, and we'll talk a lot about that because that is going to change the way that everybody plays. It's going to change the way Washington plays. It's going to change the way Oregon plays. It's going to change the way that Jed Fish coaches because he's going to make choices that he might not otherwise make, and that might include his starting quarterback. Um,
Hmm.
and Oregon fans have a little bit right now on their plate of 3 consecutive losses to Washington. They want this. They want this bad, and I think the team does. I don't think there's a reason practices are closed this week. There's a reason we're not going to hear anything next week either. We might get a little bit of player availability on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We're not going to hear a lot because the players are not happy about 3 consecutive losses by 3 points or four. I mean, it's been such a close contest in all of those games that really hurt Oregon in all of those games. I think it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be fun to talk about. I did a deep dive for our members. I did a deep dig into the offense today for Washington. I'll do a deep dig into their defense for next week. Just kind of looking at everything they do and some of their top players. Obviously, they may start a different quarterback, so we're going to find out when they play Saturday. But we'll talk a little bit more about that next week.
Sounds good. I hope we don't have to see that second string quarterback because I saw him against UCLA and I was like, oh, that could be a problem.
He is going to be a problem, but the thing is, Jed Fish has already overplayed his hand. I'll just start
Yeah.
with that. He's overplayed his hand because it's already out there that he might start. So guess what's happening? The staff is prepared. They are
Hmm.
going to be prepared for that quarterback. Do I think it would be wise to have him play a whole game? I don't think we've seen enough of him to think that he's going to be able to handle the entire offense and the entire defense for Oregon, right? He's not going to be able to handle the Washington entire offense. He came in for specialty plays. and he was good in against UCLA in the second half. Is he going to be that good against Oregon at Autzen Stadium in a rivalry game that is going to be amped up? And that would be a big risk and a big gamble to take. So we'll see. But we'll talk more next week, and I think it's going to be a really fun time. I'm going to really looking forward to next week.
All right, sounds good. Always a pleasure, Scott.
All right, thanks, Drew. Talk to you soon.
Take care.